Welcome into episode 362 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, we're 10 games into the 2024-2025 NHL season. The Boston Bruins find themselves last place in the Atlantic Division. And I'll just quickly finish that thought, and this will be my very quick, brief opening shift, which is just that through 10 games, for a lot of reasons, the Bruins deserve to be where they are in the standings. And I actually would go as far to say, even though they're last in their division, I think they're lucky to be at the point total that they're at, even though they're still last in the division. I mean, they're 4-5-1. They have 2 regulation wins through the first 10 games, which means 2 of their wins was a shot away the other direction from being a loss. So they could be. I know they're not, but it's not. They're not far away from being. What would that be? What's the record now? 4-5-1. So they'd be 2-5-3. I mean, I know they won those games, but yeah, it just hasn't been pretty. Lot of losses that have been multi-goal losses, and their wins have been, razor thin. So they're last in the division. We'll break it all down, but they deserve to be there so far.
Yeah, do you know how many teams have fewer regulation wins than the Bruins?
Maybe 1, Anaheim?
3. 3 teams have fewer. The San Jose Sharks, Utah Hockey Club, and the Islanders. All have 1 regulation win. That's
Wow.
it. Bruins have 2 in 10 games. Yeah, so my opening shift is one of the biggest problems right now, which is the power play, which was just absolutely atrocious in Tuesday night's loss to the Philadelphia Flyers. A 2-0 shutout loss to the team that had given up the most goals in the NHL going into Tuesday night. And, we can get into 5-on-5 as well, but the power play was the single biggest problem in this game and has become definitely one of the biggest problems they've had so far. Bruins go 0-for-4 in the power play with just 2 shots on goal. And those 2 shots came during an extended 5-on-3. They had a minute 37 of a 5-on-3. And really only one of those shots actually made Sam Ersson do any work in the Flyers' net. One of them was actually partially blocked and just fluttered in on him for an easy cover-up. Just way too stationary. Made the Flyers' penalty kill's job so easy. Like, guys, I've rewatched that 5-on-3 a few times now because I detailed it at length in the column I posted on weei.com. But the 3 Flyers penalty killers barely moved for a minute and a half. Like, they were just packed in, and the Bruins did nothing to get them moving, to get them spread out in any way. It was like they expected the Flyers to just pull themselves out of position at some point. And it's like, no penalty kill is going to do that. Just standing around, shooting into bodies, shooting into sticks. Like, there's no excuse for allowing shooting lanes to be that clogged during a 5-on-3. Just basic body and puck movement, moving quickly, should open up lanes and open up shots. And they didn't do it. And they ended up, again, with really just the one chance that actually tested Ersson. Then they get 2 more power plays the rest of the game. 0 shots on net on either of those 2 power plays. It just looks completely lost. Pucks are dying on just about everyone's stick, but I would say Marchand and McAvoy's in particular. Montgomery tried putting Justin Brazeau in for Pavel Zacha, and it's like, all right, I mean, it's something, but like, that's not the problem. The net front guy wasn't the problem. So it is that their power play, along with a lot of other things, is just in a really bad spot right now.
Yeah, 100%. That was a very extended 5-on-3 that didn't generate nearly enough. And it reminds me of something that the very wise Glenn Ordway would say. Do you know what I'm going to say? The drop that we used to play all the time when Brian and I were producers back in the day it's about ball movement of the ball, except for puck in this situation because Glenn said that all the time, and it's true. It applies to hockey too. You got to move. You got to move the puck faster. You got to open up those shooting lanes in order to have any chance at all to not have your shot blocked. So that was something that was talked about in the post game press conference with Coach Montgomery. Another thing that, and this is my opening shift, another thing that was talked about in the post game press conference, Scott, you asked this question, was how come they weren't able to build off their overtime win against Toronto on Saturday. We had talked about it in our last podcast, thought maybe that was a turning point where they could start to go on a win streak or just take momentum to get themselves over that 500 winning percentage. And instead and Brian, you mentioned this last episode, they have 2 games against the Flyers that were right in the stretch following that win against Toronto that they could have tried to take advantage of, because coming into the game, the Flyers were the last place team in the entire Eastern Conference, weren't playing well. They're not built like a team that should be able to beat the Bruins on paper. And you think, you see the goalie matchup and you're like, Korpisalo's in net. And if you didn't watch the game, you'd be like, maybe that's why. Like, no, he had nothing to do with it. He actually played well, I thought. And the second goal is an empty netter. McAvoy makes a stupid mistake, whatever. But my point is, they weren't able to take any momentum from that, or confidence even. It didn't seem like they played with a lot of confidence after that win against Toronto. And when Scott asked Monty, he said, why wasn't that possible? And he said, I don't know. So it seems like they're in a situation where they don't necessarily have the answers to why their confidence level or compete level has not been where it needs to be, and why they're not doing certain things right, including on their power play.
Yeah, he said it's a good question. So thank you, Monty. And then he said it's a multitude of things. It seems like some guys are still fighting it as far as their confidence and their ability to just be smooth with the puck on the ice.
Yeah. Well, so there's a lot of places we can go right now, guys, and we'll just jump back because before really dissecting the power play too much, I want to look at some bird's eye view numbers through 10 games for the Bruins. Okay. So as mentioned off the top, they're 4-5-1 to start the year. They're 1-3-1 in their last 5 games. That includes being shut out twice. Nashville, 4-0 in Nashville, and then to the Flyers last night, 2-0 in Boston. We mentioned they have 2 regulation wins through 10 games. They're 25th in goal differential, team goal differential. They're 25th in the league in power play percentage. They're tied for 15th with one other team in the league in penalty killing. So the penalty killing, although on this list seems better than the rest, it's still right in the smack dab of the middle of the league. You want to be a top 10 in both special teams, ideally. And they're 20th in shots on goal to start the year. So that's not all the analytics, but it's just a couple of snapshots to say that up and down, 5-on-5 special teams, this team they are exactly where they should be based on the eye test and the numbers. And I think a big reason for why they are where they are right now is because for one reason or another, whether it's complacency, lack of confidence, it's not bad luck because they're not snake bitten at all. They're not even really generating. I would say a lot of it falls on their leaders. And I want to highlight some of their leaders beyond David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand. Charlie McAvoy, 0 points in his last 8 games. Charlie Coyle, 1 point in 10 games. Elias Lindholm, 0 points in his last 7 games played. Hampus Lindholm, 0 points in his last 5 games played. Pavel Zacha, 1 point in his last 8 games played. You can talk about Trent Frederick, and I can talk about Morgan Geekie, and we can all discuss where the lineup has been deficient, but it starts at the top. And even David Pastrnak, who's leading the team in scoring, so I'm not going to harp on him, but his points per game pace is down from what he should be doing. And Brad Marchand, we'll give him some time because of his age and surgery he's coming off of, but he hasn't really been, scorching hot either. So I would look at their leaders right now, and they're not leading the way.
Yeah, I mean, Marchand's only goal was in a 3-on-3 overtime situation. So still nothing 5-on-5, nothing on the power play. I know he has some assists, but yeah, it's a lot of guys who are the core of your team who have not been anywhere close to good enough. And like we've said this on previous podcasts, so it sounds like we're repeating ourselves. That's because we are, because they haven't gotten going. 10 games gives you like that kind of one of those first nice round numbers for the season where you're 1/8 of the way through the season. And like, I know they're not going to stay at this, but I mean, Charlie Coyle's on pace for 8 points this year. Like, what are we doing? I mean, Morgan, I know you said you like Geeky's further down the lineup, but Geeky was expected to be a top 9 guy. He has 1 point so far. Trent Frederick 3, Pavel Zacha 3. Like these guys are on pace to finish in the 20s in points, like between 20 to 25 points. Like these guys need to be 50, 60, pushing 65 points. Like, and they're just all so far off the pace. And it's like, Jim Montgomery talking about the lack of offense last night said, we're not making plays. We're not doing enough to generate high danger scoring chances. Whether that's a will to go to those areas or not the right game plan, we're all culpable for not coming out with the victory tonight. And it's like, there's kind of 2 levels to this because, well, actually there's 3. The top level is like, is the personnel good enough? Which that's Don Sweeney's responsibility. And that is a very fair question right now. Montgomery mentions the game plan, like that's his responsibility. So if there's something about the way that they're practicing and that he's trying to get them to play that isn't clicking, that isn't producing, that's up to the coaching staff to fix. But then there's that will to go to those areas. And I would just expand that to be like the will to outwork your opponents, which I think they've done maybe twice this season, 2 or 3 games. Like, how many games have we been able to walk away from and been like, yeah, the Bruins outworked their opponent tonight?
Probably like, Montreal and Toronto.
Yeah. I was gonna say like LA, maybe Colorado. Like, again, less than half. No matter how you break down, less than half their games. And like that is on the players. That's not. Like, I can't put it on the coaches if the players aren't working hard. There's whatever else is wrong, whether it's the game plan, whether it's the line combinations, take all that out of it. Like, there has to be like a personal pride among the players to be like, you know what? Maybe everything's not perfect for me, but I'm just going to go work my ass off and see what happens. And there just are not enough guys doing that. Like, the 4th line, great. They've done it most of the year. Not enough other guys are doing it. And it has to start there. Like, that's something that they can control. And I thought you saw it a bit on Saturday against Toronto. So then to have a step back against a huge step back against a team that you should beat, that you should be clearly better than, is so disappointing for this team.
Yeah, and before we get too much further into the episode, I did want to mention we're going to react to some of the comments that we got to our personal Twitter accounts last night, and as well as to the Skate Pod's Twitter account. Like, we haven't done a mailbag in a while, so I figured we could address some of the comments that we got regarding last night's game, because there were all sorts of different reactions. I mean, first of all, there was booing at TD Garden for, I think, the first time this season. And it wasn't just one time. It was when the Bruins had another bad power play, not during the 5-on-3, but later in the game, they got another power play. They didn't generate enough. The crowd started booing their power play. And then in the third period when they couldn't generate anything, and then obviously after the empty net goal that made it 2-0, there were boos multiple times in that game. And I know people have opinions on that. Even we on the Skate Pod disagree about whether or not we like to see that. But yeah, there was all sorts of mixed reactions. I saw some people that were mad at Patra, which I don't understand. Like Matt Patra takes this big collision and at the end of the first period and looked like he got the wind knocked out of him, which he confirmed after the game. And then he also, I mean, he didn't play bad. And then he gets into this scrum with Andre, who sucker punched him, which Patra also said after the game. And I got one comment that Patra shouldn't be getting involved in that. Like, what would you do if you got punched in the face? Like, and he looks back at the ref, sees that the ref's not going to call it. So I guess in your mind you go, all right, well, if he's not going to call that, then I can get a shot back in. Like, but yeah, I don't know what you guys think about either of those things: the booing, the the different responses that you got on social media yesterday.
Yeah, I have no problem with Patra standing up for himself. Like he got punched in the face and there wasn't a call. Like if anything, like good to see someone have a little bit of fire. Would be nice for someone other than the smallest guy in the team to have some. The booing, it was deserved. Like you're down 1-0 against, as I said, the team that had given up the most goals in the league in the third period, and you get 3 shots on goal in the third period. 3 the entire period. In theory, you should be desperately trying to come back. And only one of those shots was that 5-on-5. One of them was actually shorthanded by Marchand during a penalty.
Yeah, that was the one that almost went in, right?
Yeah, and then you get one from distance during it was a point shot during the extra attacker situation that Elias Lindholm tipped in the slot. That's it. That was the entirety of your third period shots on goal. Again, the power play you mentioned that there was booing at the end of, 0 shots on that power play in the third period. Like it was embarrassing. Like, I thought the first 2 periods, I actually thought the Bruins created some chances, probably not enough, but some. Samuel Ersson played well, but this was not a ran into a hot goalie who stole the game type of game. It might have become that had you tested him more in the third period, but you can't call it that kind of game when you land 3 shots on goal in the third period. Like that's on you. That's not the other team's goalie stole the game. I saw everyone making a big deal out of how many shots Philly blocked. I think it was 24 for the game or something, which is a lot, and credit to their defense for being willing to do that. But I also look at that as being on the Bruins because, again, a lot of those came during power plays when they weren't doing enough to open up lanes. And even 5-on-5, I just thought they were settling. They're settling for perimeter shots, and those are the easiest ones to block. So even that, it's like, yeah, credit to Philly. Like, I don't want to, act like they did nothing, but you got to work to avoid block shots, and the Bruins didn't.
Yeah, I'd be like, all right, if you're playing basketball and every single 3 that you shot got blocked, like that's on you. Your shot selection is not good. Why do I keep bringing up basketball metaphors today? I don't know. Maybe because the Celtics are doing better. But yeah, it's
now seems like a good time to announce that we're actually pivoting to the Celtics because we're sick of talking about the Bruins. So.
Yeah, no, I mean it's sometimes the comparisons make sense because especially I was a 3-point shooter when I was a basketball player back in the day. And if I had every single shot that I took from the perimeter blocked, my coach would be like, yeah, you're sitting, you're on the bench now. You're not coming back in because you got to, find the open player and take the open shot. But yeah, I guess it was deserved in this case. I also am under the mindset that I just don't like to hear it. I don't know. I don't like when home fans boo their own team. I know you guys disagree with me on that. That's fine. Please don't boo me for this take. But I don't like it. I don't know. There's especially early in the season, and I saw a mixed reaction to some of the stuff that I posted reporting about the booing. Some people were saying it was well deserved, and other people are like me and said, they're 10 games into the season. This is a perennial playoff team. Like, you're booing them, and it certainly didn't help because once the booing started in the third period, like that was the Bruins' worst period, and I understand both perspectives of this. But like it's probably like what, like 20-30% of fans that would boo, and then the other ones are quiet, and you'll hear them cheer in different situations. But I don't know. It was definitely an ugly game. To get shut out and to have your closest chance be this weird fluke, almost goal that Marchand banks in or almost banks in off Erson, who went to play the puck out behind the goal and never really like hustled to get back in the net. I don't know. That was a weird moment in the game, but he's able to dive back on it. That was probably their closest scoring chance, guys. I don't know if you guys can remember a better chance. That one was stopped right at the goal line.
Yeah, they didn't have many scoring chances. I'll just jump back to the original prompt about the booing real quick. Look, at the end of the day, I don't. What do we? The first thing I'll say is, Bruins fans are not going to boo the Bruins on the ice if the Bruins are showing an honest effort. It's just not going to happen. Bruins fans don't boo at the result. They boo at the process.
Very quickly, I'll just say I remember saying something like that last year, and then it immediately blew up in my face because they booed at the end of a game where they had like 42 shots and actually did just get hot goalied, and I was like, that was really stupid. So that they have done that as well.
Then I will adjust my rhetoric to say they rarely will boo effort, but I also don't believe that they're booing just because of that game. I think the Bruins fans are booing on behalf of the majority of what we've seen this year, especially on home ice. And I will just also say the players deserve it over 10 games. They've played like shit. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. And I just don't know what we expect Bruins fans to do that are sitting in traffic to get to a game after a long day at work or riding the train. They're not just going to sit there in silence, paying an arm and a leg to go to a game. Like, they're within their right to voice their displeasure. And I'm not going to put the lack of fight in a third period on the Bruins players being booed and that affecting them. Like, I'm not saying that's false, but if that's the case, then that's just soft on their part. But in any event, as it pertains to the game, let's talk about the power play quickly because it's atrocious. That 5-on-3, elongated 5-on-3, Scott, you wrote about it in detail. Far too stationary, far too away from the net. Like, when you have a 5-on-3 in particular, the top of the umbrella personnel, you cave in to the top of the circles, you close that gap. And Charlie McAvoy, point blank, I believe, in my opinion, his lease should be up. I've seen enough through 10 games so far, in addition to just not really being able to be that guy in the past. His decision making is far too slow. He's not a shot first guy, and he's also just overthinking things. I know him being a righty at the top of the umbrella is a deviation from Torrey Krug as a lefty over the years, and that's a easier play to make for a lefty to feed Pastrnak in the one-time position. But for me, the power play troubles, fairly or unfairly, in my opinion, are starting and ending with Charlie McAvoy. And I mean, are we just going to keep giving him games to get going here? And as I mentioned earlier, 0 points in his last 8 games. So 5-on-5, he's not producing anything. And where's the bite from Charlie McAvoy? How many whistles are there going to be around the Bruins net where an opposing forward kind of goes in, lets his presence be known, and then McAvoy just kind of avoids confrontation and maybe hugs him, asks how his summer was? Like, that's not the Charlie McAvoy that Bruins fans fell in love with, and it's not the player that got him to the level that he's at. So I'm not sure what's going on with him and David Pastrnak in particular as the next leaders of this Boston Bruins team, because I haven't loved their their energy or play away from pucks or their snarl at all this year. And they need to pick it up because Brad Marchand's still around, but they're the next wave of leadership. And I think it's fair to have questions right now that this team has enough leadership beyond Brad Marchand. And that's not really me hyper focusing on 10 games this year. Maybe a little bit it is, and maybe that's unfair, but I just haven't loved what I've seen out of their leaders that are now. I mean, David Pastrnak's in 11th season, 10th, 11th season. Charlie McAvoy has been around since 2017. They're not kids anymore.
Yeah, and to your point, Brian, I think that we're used to seeing a Bruins team that has more leadership throughout the lineup. Like, obviously, 2 years ago, they were full of leaders with Bergeron and Krejci and Foligno, and they had guys up and down the lineup with experience, and that they could lead on the bench as well. I mean, even when they had Pat Maroon last year during the playoffs, he was somebody that was vocal on the bench. Maybe they do need more voices that are leaders on the team. So I guess that's a good thing to bring up because they really, those guys have since left the team either because of retirement or they're left in free agency or a trade. But to your point about McAvoy on the power play, I agree with you. The 5-on-3, he had the one shot that he tried to get off. He kind of whiffed on it and it didn't go anywhere. And I believe it got cleared the other way. And I think that at the point, he isn't moving the puck fast enough. But I also think that guys are not rotating their positions enough either. Like, guys are just standing on the flanks the whole power play and not necessarily cycling to the point or like moving themselves to a different spot on the ice to try to open passing or shooting lanes. So there's just it's not even just puck movement, it's all movement on the power play needs to be better. It needs to be more confusing. There's going to be a guy that gets lost in coverage because obviously there's only 4 guys out there, so somebody's gonna be open if you can move if you can get the defenders moving around, especially on a 5-on-3, which it felt like that was a good opportunity for them to kind of get the monkey off their back on the power play, and instead it's like shot block after shot block after shot block, and they're not able to do much with it. So I don't want to harp too much on just the 5-on-3 because it's the power play overall hasn't looked good. And McAvoy also made a bad decision when there was extra attacker, which is kind of a de facto power play because you got an extra guy on the ice for you there. And he ends up turning it over, trying to get the puck out through the neutral zone, and it ends up in the Bruins' empty net.
Yeah, I mean, with McAvoy running the power play, yeah, like it just seems like the same issues over and over again. And we said it before the season, like it's the one part of his game that he continues to not really master, continues to struggle with, and it feels like it's gotten even worse this year. And like that's maybe a little bit of small sample size, but I mean, they're 2 for 20 over the last 5 games. Yeah, it's just, and the lack of body movement has been one of my sticking points with the Jim Montgomery power play. Like most of the time he's been here, because he will always cite the need for more puck movement, for faster puck movement. And I remember, and this was like probably a year and a half or 2 years ago, I remember asking about more body movement, about guys moving around more. And he straight up said, like, well, puck movement is more important than bodies moving. And it's like, that's probably true, but that doesn't mean you can't do both. Like you still need both. And I just think this power play, just 5-on-3 or 5-on-4, just gets so set and like everyone just kind of digging into their spot and then not moving. And it's like, how is that? Like, how do you expect a passing or shooting lane to open up when the penalty killers can all just stand in the same spot and like key in on exactly what you're doing? They know where everyone is all the time because they're not moving. like nothing's going to surprise them. So like, yeah, you can pass as quickly as you want and as crisply as you want, which they're not doing that either. But it's still not going to matter if you're not spreading the killers out. Yeah, I would absolutely change personnel. Like I'm with Brian there. Like there's doesn't mean you can't go back to it at some point, but there would be no more leash for me right now.
If you just to quickly hit on something you just said, Scott, about players moving, like if you think back to the Cassidy or the power play under Cassidy, and maybe even before that, there were plenty of times where you saw the defenseman down low in the zone. Like he would at some point, everybody would cycle to the point where somebody like McAvoy or Krug would be down low. Like they would end up down there. There would be some like give and go that and ended up with the defenseman at the net or near the net and moving through the zone. Whereas I feel like right now, McAvoy, you almost exclusively see him right at the top of the umbrella. And that there's just not a lot of full movement with where he can interchange, which by the way, in the past, like when he's driven the net, when he's had some give and go chances, he's pretty good at generating and scoring in those situations. And Krug used to be another guy that would do that. But and I'm not talking about the Chara net front on the power play, but there are just other ways that the defenseman can work their way around the zone as long as somebody comes and fills that point spot that they could move around. And McAvoy kind of tends to stay right up at the top. And the Bruins do have personnel that they can move into that spot. I don't want to, Scott, I'm sorry I cut you off, but I did want to mention that.
Yeah, well, that actually leads into what I was going to say. So I'll cite Ty Anderson, who had the numbers here, but he tweeted, last 3 years, Bruins with Pastrnak, McAvoy, Marchand on the power play, 45 goals in 376 minutes. Swap in Hampus Lindholm for McAvoy, it's 27 goals in 103 minutes. So more than half as many goals in less than a third of the time. Like, just statistically, it's been a more productive power play when Hampus Lindholm is running. And you also have Mason Lohrei as an option. So I would try either one of those. Again, like, I'm not saying that solves everything. And I don't know if neither one of those guys is Torrey Krug. Like, that's another thing we're realizing is we knew at the time, like, Torrey Krug is elite at running a power play. And I think you're just constantly being reminded of it every year since, where it's like, oh yeah, it's actually not that easy to find someone who is like a true power play quarterback master.
Well, more teams than not, though, I would say in the NHL have that stylistic defenseman that can do it. Whether it's a smaller, shiftier defenseman that just moves the puck quick, or somebody who's a little bit more size. But your sentiment is correct, Scott, in the sense the Bruins just don't have it, and we took for granted when they did have, or at least I did. And whether it's Charlie McAvoy or somebody else, but I'll stick to McAvoy because, Bridget, you mentioned he's just kind of stationary at the top of the umbrella, not really doing anything. Not only is he stationary, but his weight is going towards his own net. He's on his heels. He's not playing on his toes. And as a defenseman or anybody quarterbacking the power play, you have to play on your toes with an attack mentality. You want to not backpedal away from the PKers. You want to attack them. And the biggest problem with McAvoy is not only does he not do that, but he needs to adopt a shot-first mentality so that opposing goalies and penalty killers believe him when he has the puck that he could shoot. When they believe that you can shoot because you've done it, now passing lane's open. Right now, penalty killers in the box and the goaltender, they see McAvoy with the puck at the top of the umbrella. They honestly know that puck's not getting through because he's not shooting it. He's indecisive, and he's gonna defer when he gets rattled. Oh, what do I do? Well, I'll give it to David for a second. You know what I mean? Like he defers and gives it to Pastrnak, but Pasternak's not in a shooting lane or he's not really in a shooting position because McAvoy didn't really set up the play. What Torrey Krug mastered in was quick, decisive decision-making, whether it was a shot or a pass. He also was very deceptive with his head fakes, his head movements, fake shots, all these things. But what I'm learning, and maybe shame on me for not realizing it earlier, because McAvoy has a ton of tools and pure talent, but it doesn't come natural to him, at least in the power play, to just make those quick decisions. It's not who he is. And insert Lindholm or Lohrei.
Yeah, I think Lindholm is probably a quicker, more decisive puck mover. I think Lohrei is more willing to jump into plays like I was mentioning before. He's more likely to try something a little bit shifty with a fake shot or driving towards the net or trying to do things a little bit more himself. And he has a more of an offensive mindset. So I think that both of those guys who, once again, they're not going to be as good at it as Krug. Maybe at some point Lohrei, gets better at it. Not that he's not good at it now, but obviously he's still pretty early in his career. He could add some tools to his toolkit as well. But I think the numbers show Lindholm is a good option there, and I think that you're at the point where it could be your job if your power play just continues to be like this. If you're Monty, it's like, okay, well, you didn't try everything, and you're not trying something new when it's not working. Well, then that's on you as the coaches to make the moves if you see something not working. And it looks like the McAvoy being up there right now isn't working. That would be the easy change to make, because you have guys that you could put there. It's not like it's a team full of guys you wouldn't trust to move the puck up there, and it's time to try something different.
Can I offer a suggestion and see what you guys think about this as well, regardless of who's at the quarterback position on the power play? One thing I would like to see, and it can interchange on a power play where because as you guys have pointed out, there should be movement, right? I would like to see Pastrnak and Marchand on their strong sides more on end zone opportunities, because if you look back at some film on the power play that used to be ran by Torrey Krug, you had Bergeron on the bumper, you had Marchand, Pastrnak, and then, they'd have a net front guy, oftentimes DeBrusk, Heinen, whomever. You would see Marchand swing on his forehand side on that half wall, and Krug would find him in motion, right? They would time it together. They'd be in sync. And he would find him in motion. Marchand he'd lift that leg like he was going to snap a shot off. And oftentimes he'd try to find Bergeron in the bumper for a tip, or Pastrnak backdoor, or DeBrusk, or something like that. I understand the want and desire for Pastrnak to be on his offside there. And he was on his offside a lot in the time that I'm speaking of, but they would switch it here and there. I also think Pastrnak, as good of a goal scorer as he is, he's as good of a playmaker. Get him on his strong side. Let him see the ice more and get him away from that one-time opportunity, which you can go to over the course of 2 minutes, but switch it up. And I also don't love Marchand on his offside. He's not a one-time threat, and he's just too stationary. Get him on his forehand side. If that means getting him off that unit, I don't know. But he needs to be on his forehand side, his strong side, more on the end zone looks. And that could just come from him and Pastrnak. Just if things are getting stale, they got to look at each other and, hey, let's do a quick little rotation here. Instead, they're just sitting there waiting for one-timers like they're the Harlem Globetrotters. They're not. They're the opposite. Like I don't care who you are, Connor McDavid, doesn't matter. You have to move without the puck to create opportunities.
Yeah, it could get them looking and moving downhill more. Whereas right now, it's like when they're on their offsides, they're getting the puck, and the first place their eyes are going are back to McAvoy at the point. Get it? If you're on your strong side, you're looking downhill, and your eyes are on the net, and ideally you're moving towards the net. And then look, just throw it to the front for something greasy, especially if you keep Brazeau on that unit. He's gonna be there at the net front. So yeah, it was, when they put Brazeau out there in the third period with that top unit, someone sarcastically tweeted at me, a lot of good that change did. And I was like, they attempted 2 shots and neither of them got to the net. Net front guy can't do anything if the puck's not getting there.
Mm-hmm.
So just, get pucks to that area.
And retrieve them. You have an extra guy. You shouldn't be losing loose puck battles.
Bridget, you mentioned how this reflects on Montgomery, if he doesn't change things up. And I would add to it too. Like, it's especially damning because the power play is his responsibility. Him and Chris Kelly are the two coaches who run it and have run it. You know, they're the ones who ran it last year when it struggled throughout the second half of the season, and now they're the ones overseeing it as it struggles out of the gate this year. Yeah, like Montgomery's done good work with power plays in the past. St. Louis has took a huge step forward when he was put in charge of it. So it's not like he can't do it. It's not like he doesn't have ideas, but it seems like he doesn't have ideas for this group to change things up. And I do just think there's like, in general, just too much reluctance to take one or two of your stars, one or two of your captains off it. Like, I get it that is a hard thing to do, and that's an uncomfortable situation for a coach to go up to Charlie McAvoy and say, "Hey, we're demoting you to the second unit," or Brad Marchand. Obviously, you're not going to demote Pasternak, nor should you. But yeah, at some point, like, you have to, because if we think Montgomery is on the hot seat, or is at least on a seat that's getting warmer, that would be one of the things that Don Sweeney would look at and be like, "Hey, you're the power play guy, and like, this power play keeps sucking. So yeah, like, you got to do something."
So one thing I also wanted to bring up is, through 10 games, the obvious narrative is this Bruins team a playoff team, or are they not? And I know that it's early to analyze that now. None of us here think that they're a last place team in the division, and we all predict them to be the playoffs. But the eye test is telling us, you know, they're not only are they losing, but it's not like they're snake bitten. They're not generating anything. So there's two sectors of Bruins fans out there right now. There's number one, they're saying this team isn't showing that they're good enough to be a playoff team, and their morale is down. Their playoff team hopes could be in trouble. And then there's other Bruins fans that are saying, pump the brakes. They're not playing well. It's early. I still have full confidence they're going to be a playoff team. And through 10 games, I understand both frames of thought, and I would lean towards the latter, and that is that it's early and they'll get their act together. But I want to throw this out there, because maybe, just maybe, guys, it's not just a 10-game sample size that people are looking at. Maybe the Bruins overachieved last year. And I say that because dating back to January of 2024 through last night, the Bruins have played 57 regular season games. Okay. Their record is 30, 17, and 10. And if you're keeping track of, Brian, I don't care about the logistics of the overtime. How many wins, how many losses? Okay, fine. 30 wins, 27 losses. A little bit over 500 of a hockey team. Is this kind of just who they are? They got off to a hot start last year, and then they were kind of mediocre and made the playoffs based off of a hot start, and then found a way to win a round. And they're not as bad as what they've shown right now, but they'll get back to 500 hockey, and maybe they're just a 500 hockey team, maybe a little bit more, and a little bit more than a 500 hockey team generally isn't making the playoffs. So do fans have reason to wonder if are our Bruins just over a 500 hockey team?
Yeah, I mean, they're not playing like a playoff team right now. Like you said, like they're not. It's not just snake bitten. It's not like they're getting chances and they're not going in. They're, they're 25th in scoring. They're bottom quarter of the league, and you mentioned eye test, like the numbers test too. Like, they're bottom quarter of the league in scoring chances, expected goals, Corsi, like all the analytics there. It's not good. And again, it's like it has to be fixed on multiple levels. Like, you need better personnel, which isn't really going to happen in the short term. Maybe Tyler Johnson, if and when they sign him, provides some boost. Maybe there's a call up. Like, you can do a little bit there. You're not getting a bona fide second line right wing right now. That is still something you're going to have to wait on. The way they play needs to be much better. I mentioned it, but like they wanted to be a possession team. They wanted to hold on to pucks in the offensive zone, go to dirty areas for high danger chances, all that. They haven't been. They haven't been a possession team. They don't have a lot of offensive zone time. They're not getting high danger chances. Like they're not doing any of that. And then just individually, players have to be much better. So like there is a higher ceiling for this team than what they've done so far, because there just shouldn't be this many guys who are underperforming. But until they play much better hockey individually and on a team level, yeah, like you can question as much as you want. Like this is not an unlucky 4-5-1. This is a this is a team that is what their record says they are right now. And right now that is not a playoff team.
Yeah, and I just was kind of like going through some of the comments that we got that were in relation to that, and people, which this more relates to what you said, Brian, about did they overachieve last year? And so you're like, in the year after Bergeron and Krejci retire, you're thinking, oh, this could be a rebuild. And then last year they start off hot, and you're like, oh no, this isn't a rebuild. This is a playoff team again. And then one of the comments that we got from someone with an account that says Sean Thorin says, people are arguing that maybe they wasted a year last year. Basically, they should have started to rebuild then, which I disagree with still. We've had this conversation before, but like maybe they did have success last season that was above. It was certainly above what was expected, maybe above what the personnel could do, or not could do, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like above necessarily what that roster was capable of. This year on paper, we thought that the roster looked more balanced, except for that second line right wing spot. So far, I don't know if you could say that Zadorov or Lindholm have really impacted the Bruins, especially not consistently. I mean, I kind of was under the impression Zadorov was going to come in and just bring a little bit more fire, and like we're going to see some big open ice hits more often, and we're going to see the grit more often and the getting involved in scrums more often. And I think maybe him worrying about the penalties has kind of contributed to him shying away from that a little bit. But I mean, the one guy that they brought in that's doing that is Mark Kastelik, and it shouldn't just be him that's doing that after the whistle and bringing that to the Bruins. And then Elias Lindholm kind of sometimes just gets lost in the shuffle. He's not an overly emotional player. He's kind of one of those even-keeled guys who does the little things right, but at this point, puck's not finding him, and I don't know how much of a boost he's given the team so far either.
Not much. I mean, Brian highlighted, like, he's one of the guys who's been way too quiet. What was it? 0 points his last 7 games.
Yep.
And that was after what we thought was a pretty encouraging start. I think he had 5 in, it must have been the first 3 games, right? So, yeah, like I thought early on it was like, okay, well, clearly still working on some chemistry, but like there's enough there that looks pretty good. And he has definitely taken a step back and kind of just disappeared into the background at times. And like that can't happen, okay, making some nice, doing the little things or whatever, like that's great. Fourth liners do the little things. You're paying him to be a first line center, or at worst a second line center. Like you got to do more than some of the little things. He definitely needs to be more involved. Zadorov, I actually think, has kind of been fine once they sort of settled into him with Peak on the third pairing. I know they were on for the goal against Philly, but I thought they were fine most of the game, and I don't really put that goal on them, like Bruins had a bad change. Two guys are changing off as the Flyers start to rush up ice, end up with the 3-on-2, and then once they're in the zone, Patra just does a flyby along the wall, like not good enough. You gotta at least turn that into a skirmish. Like you gotta at least have a battle for that puck. You can't just skate by the guy and give him a wide open passing lane. That was tough. But yeah, so
I actually don't mind the looks that Zadorov Peak pairing was getting the other day. They were one of the only pairs, maybe the only pair that was getting shots through. They didn't get their shots blocked as much as the others, I guess is the best way to put it. They were and they were shot ready. Peak has done that pretty well. He kind of seems like he always brings that mentality into the game. But what I mean is I just thought that, like, in terms of being the big bad Bruins as a mentality, Zadorov is kind of a guy that you would look for that from. And maybe we just didn't necessarily have the right expectations, but it's not that he's playing bad, but it's just that I thought he was going to have some snarl that maybe woke them up, because at this point you're watching that third period and you're like, well, they need a wake up call, and it's not coming from there was no one. It wasn't coming from anyone yesterday. And sometimes it's a fight, sometimes it's whatever. There's just got to be something that energizes them. They haven't been doing that this year.
And Zadorov should have been the poster child for the Bruins' identity this year as it pertains to being hard to play against and physical. But he shouldn't have been the only player in that. Like, you know, there are players that the Bruins have that have snarl and fight to their game and edge to their game historically. I'm talking about Charlie McAvoy. I'm talking about Trent Frederick. Those two individuals have been MIA in the edge category. And quite frankly, I remember hearing on a 32 Thoughts podcast from Elliot Friedman that he heard whispers, or the sentiment may be, that the Bruins got really mentally screwed up after their first two games against Florida because the Bruins wanted to settle some scores and the Panthers didn't allow them to. And the Bruins have just, you know, they're just kind of left with this, like, this feeling inside of them of unfinished business. And it's just completely distracted them. I think through 10 games, that's completely unacceptable if that's the reality. But it's almost like the Panthers not allowing the Bruins to get some retribution in those first couple of games to settle some scores just kind of completely just drained them of energy in an unacceptable manner. And Max Jones, the Bruins brought in to be this spark plug energy guy who goes in hard on the forecheck, mixes it up. Think of the likes of like a Chris Wagner, but maybe a little bit bigger and a better skater. And he hasn't even been able to crack the lineup. So just, yeah, like you guys would think, like, you know, you lose to Dallas at home pretty handedly. You're losing to the Flyers, one of the worst teams in the league for the last handful of years. Haven't had a great start to your season. Where is the give a shit meter? Quite frankly, like they're just out there going through the motions, accepting defeat, accepting that they're just not feeling it, that their confidence is lacking. Go out and do something about it. Like, I know it's a long season, but if I'm reading between the tea leaves, this locker room does not strike me as a locker room that is galvanized right now. It strikes me as a locker room that, you know, they're just feeling sorry for themselves. Oh, woe is us. Like, fuck that. Like, where's the fire? And where's the accountability? Oh, there's like you guys can maybe enlighten listeners. You guys are in the locker rooms after games. How pissed off are guys? Or is it just kind of, you know, it's
they don't sound pissed off at all. Like I
Exactly.
haven't heard that from any players. You know, we obviously talked to Martian the most because he's the captain, and to his credit, he gets out there after tough losses and answers questions. But he still gives off the vibes of like, it's early, we're gonna figure it out, we're not panicking. And you know what you say in the media is one thing, like that's that's fine. But I do wonder, like, if behind closed doors, is anyone getting mad? Like, is anyone raising their voice? I would hope so. Obviously, we don't get to see that, so we don't know for sure. But yeah, like they've tried to be more vocal in practice. Like after it was last week after the Dallas lost, that Friday practice between the Dallas and Toronto games was, I think, the loudest I've heard them at practice in a long time. Like it was a lot of talking, chatter, banging sticks. Like there was energy, and it seemed to pay off. They played well against Toronto, and now it's gone again. Like there's just no excuse for not having energy Tuesday night. You had two days between games. You had an off day Sunday. You had a good practice day on good full practice day on Monday. Like there's no reason you shouldn't have had energy for that game. And the whole, like, it's early, it's early, it's a long season. It is, and no one's expecting you to play at playoff intensity for 82 games. But there are pockets during the season where you need to turn it up. And they're in one of those right now. Like, and it can't just be 1 out of every 5 games. Like, they need to turn it up for 2 weeks. Get on a winning streak, get yourself in a better position. And then if you have an off game somewhere after that, like, okay, that's understandable. But
yeah,
it can't be 3 off games in a row and then 1 kind of good game.
Yeah, and I know we have to go here soon, but there's just like I don't know, sometimes there's a sense of entitlement and a sense of aura about the Bruins way, like like it was the Patriots way back in the Patriots went to 9 Super Bowls and won 6 titles in 20 years. The Bruins have won 1 Stanley Cup in over 50. So this whole like, well, the culture here is so great. Everybody talks about the culture. It's like, yeah, I'm not denying the culture is not good, but can we stop acting like it's what all teams aspire to be? Like, sometimes the Bruins just rely too much on we have a good culture in this room, good group of guys in here. It's like, okay, all right, thanks, cool. What's that really done for you guys over the 5+ decades? So let's have a little bit of humility here. A little bit of humbleness won't kill you. So they're in a tough way right now, guys. They have to get out of it. Bridget, I don't want to keep you too long, so I think we have to kind of go here, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a busy day of college, coaches calls and
Okay.
everything. So.
All right. I did see somebody tweet us online about a potential mailbag in the future. I think maybe even in, if it's following a game, I think we can probably get one of those on a schedule here soon. I know people want to get some questions answered in more detail and with some more time to think of some. So we'll definitely do that soon, and we'll keep you updated. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you on Friday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen, you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.